When a savage winter storm batters the remote plains of 1885 Wyoming, a desperate mother named Rebecca Stone and her newborn daughter face almost certain peril. Their carriage is wrecked. Hope seems lost until wealthy rancher Ethan Carter charges through the blinding snow to save them. It's a moment of life and death tension that changes the course of all their lives forever. In the aftermath, a storm-battered stranger and her fragile infant find shelter in a place they never expected, forging new bonds and uncovering secrets of healing and love. Curious to learn how Rebecca and Clara's story unfolds. Will they rebuild a life in an unknown land or continue on to Montana as is planned? Stay tuned to discover every twist and turn. Remember to hit that subscribe button to support our channel and be the first to catch more heartwarming tales. Together, we'll explore the unexpected paths love can take, even in the harshest storms. A vicious Wyoming winter in the year 1885 was about to unleash its fury when Rebecca Stone, newly widowed and exhausted from caring for her one-week-old daughter, Clara realized that hope was slipping through her numb fingers. The wind howled against the worn carriage she had hired to carry them toward Montana territory, where her only living family waited. It had been mere days since her husband James had passed his heart failing soon after Clara's difficult birth, and grief weighed heavily on her already frail body. Now in the failing light of a stormy dusk, she found herself stranded in a land of knee-deep snow. The air so cold it felt like shards of glass on her face. Her driver, Mr. Taylor, had ventured out into the swirling whiteness hours ago to find help at a nearby ranch, leaving Rebecca shivering inside the carriage with a screaming, hungry infant. The wheels had broken on a hidden rock. The horses had panicked and fled, and each minute brought the temperature down another harrowing notch. Rebecca clung to Clara, pressing the fragile child to her breast. She wrapped them both in the last blanket, a gift from her late husband, that retained a lingering hint of cedar and safety. She could feel Clara weakening her. Cries became pitiful whimpers, and that terrified Rebecca more than any threat the relentless storm could hurl at them. James had been a doctor, a man who dedicated himself to healing. She could practically see his earnest, gentle eyes urging her not to give up. Her own tears nearly froze on her cheeks as she stared out into the roaring snow, begging silently for a miracle. Every muscle in her body screamed with cold, but maternal instinct pushed her to keep moving. Rubbing Clara's little hands and feet under her coat, time blurred in the wind's roar. Rebecca tried to track the passing hours on a small pocket watch, James's last gift before he died, but the mechanism froze and the watch stopped ticking. She whispered prayers into the dark, glancing out the carriage window again and again. If Mr. Taylor had met with bad luck or lost his way, no one would find them until the storm subsided, and by then she feared it would be too late. The wind abruptly shifted, rattling the battered wood panels of the carriage, and suddenly she heard hoofbeats. It might have been her imagination, but hope demanded she listen harder. The dull thud came again, louder this time. Hard hammering, Rebecca fumbled with the frozen latch on the carriage door and pushed it open. Bitter gusts bit at her face, forcing her to squint against the blowing snow. Out of the swirling gray, a horse emerged, a rider hunched low and bundled in layers of fur and wool. Rebecca's breath caught. Could this possibly be the help she had been praying for? The figure slowed, pulling the horse to a halt beside the overturned carriage. A man's voice, deep and resonant, cut through the storm. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he called, scanning the wreckage with alert, dark eyes. In her desperation, Rebecca simply held up Clara for him to see, fighting the wind for every syllable. "My baby, please, help us," she managed, voice cracking from cold and fear. He wasted no time. Dismounting in one fluid motion, he shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. He was tall, solidly built, and had an air of calm that eased her racing heart. "I'm Ethan Carter," he told her, though she barely registered the name, as the warmth of his coat enveloped her. "My ranch is close by. We have to get you and the little one out of this weather." He reached for Clara, checking the baby's pulse against his neck while shepherding Rebecca away from the battered carriage. She wanted to protest. Clara was all she had, but something in Ethan's voice and mannerism told her she could trust him. They managed to mount his massive horse together, Rebecca cradling Clara between them. The animal snorted steam into the air as it forged through drifts almost chest-high. With every jolt, Rebecca worried that Clara might slip from her grasp, but Ethan's firm arms and sure hands guided them forward. Through the endless white, she glimpsed the faint outline of fences and then a barn, and finally the glowing windows of a large house. By the time they reached it, Rebecca's consciousness hovered on the edge. All she remembered afterward was Ethan lifting her from the saddle, his voice strong and comforting, as he carried her into a place where the heat of a roaring fire chased the numbness from her limbs. When Rebecca awoke, the storm outside had quieted to a mournful whistle around the eaves. She found herself lying on a sofa near a wide stone hearth, a stack of thick quilts mounded over her. For a moment she panicked. Clara was not in her arms. Struggling to push the quilts aside, she forced her stiff limbs to move. Her head spun, but she spotted Ethan near the fire, gently rocking the baby in his arms. "She's all right," he said softly, noting her alarm. "Couldn't let you both freeze to death out there." Relief swept through her, bringing unexpected tears. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling at once grateful and vulnerable. Her eyes flicked around the room, taking in the rustic surroundings. Rough-hewn beams, well-worn chairs, and shelves lined with books. Everything felt homey and lived in, a stark contrast to the wind-ravaged night. She tried to sit up, but her muscles refused. Ethan crossed the floor in a few long strides, cradling Clara expertly in one arm, while he helped Rebecca reposition the quilts. "My ranch hands will look for Mr. Taylor at first light," he reassured her. "Storm's still bad enough that traveling tonight would be a fool's errand, but I'm sure he found shelter." Rebecca tried to summon the words to express what it meant to have found warmth and safety after hours of terror. But all she managed was a quiet thank you. She noticed Clara's cheeks were pink again, her eyes half opened in exhaustion. The baby had survived. Though how close they'd come to losing her, Rebecca didn't dare imagine. A hint of a smile crossed Ethan's face as he noted her relief. "You're welcome," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "I couldn't leave you out there. It wouldn't be right." In the coming days, as the storm raged and then gradually subsided, Rebecca learned more about the ranch and its owner. Ethan Carter was well respected in the area, known for his prosperous cattle operation, and his knack for carpentry, a skill that manifested in the intricate designs carved into his saddle and various pieces of furniture around the house. She also discovered that a tragedy had touched him too. He'd lost his wife Josephine to mountain fever 5 years prior. Her presence lingered in small details: embroidered cushions with delicate initials, carefully arranged dried flowers in vases, and some pictures on a table by the fireplace. There was a lingering sadness in the set of his shoulders when he mentioned her name, but mostly he spoke of her with fondness rather than despair. Bit by bit, the ranch became more than just a safe haven. Rebecca, struggling through her grief, found solace in the routine of daily chores. Ethan guided her through. Though he insisted she rest, she found it impossible to remain idle while her hostess instincts kicked in, an instinct born of her years as a doctor's wife, when she'd often assist James in caring for patients. She would feed the chickens or patch holes in old linens, pressing away tears as her hands remembered how to be useful again. Ethan noticed her determination, occasionally lifting an eyebrow if he thought she was overexerting herself. But seeing how it soothed her to have tasks to complete, he let her help, only cautioning her not to do more than her strength allowed. In the evenings, they'd sit before the fireplace, Clara asleep in a makeshift bassinet that Ethan had fashioned from a dresser drawer. The nights were long, filled with the moan of the wind and the pop of logs in the fire, but they no longer felt terrifying. A fragile calm replaced Rebecca's initial panic, though grief still gnawed at her when she remembered James's final breath or the emptiness that followed her every waking moment. One night, Ethan shared a memory of Josephine. "She used to keep a garden out back," he said, voice hushed, as though not to wake Clara. "Said every seed we plant is hope in the ground." He smiled faintly. "She had a way of reminding me that life goes on even in the harshest winters." Rebecca thought of James, of how he would have urged her to embrace hope, to care for their daughter first and foremost. Perhaps, she mused, Josephine's garden would survive another season if it received the right attention. A gentle possibility flickered in her heart, warming her like the firelight dancing across the hearth. Once the weather cleared, Ethan's ranch hands found Mr. Taylor safe at a neighboring homestead, as Ethan had predicted. They also managed to retrieve what remained of Rebecca's belongings from the shattered carriage. Tucked among James's medical bag and a few baby items was a compass with a pearl handle, the same one James had promised would guide them on their journey to her sister's house in Montana. Holding it, Rebecca felt a fresh stab of sorrow. She'd convinced herself that heading to her sister Rachel's was her only option. Yet in the immediate aftermath of losing James' decision-making had been muddled by grief and panic. Days turned into weeks. The ranch, which Rebecca learned was called Carter's Bend, stretched across rolling plains. Cattle dotted the landscape, watched over by a small group of loyal ranch hands who respected Ethan greatly. Rebecca soon discovered why he worked as tirelessly as any of them, swinging a hammer to mend fences, or hauling feed under the scorching sun or biting wind. He never asked more of others than he was willing to do himself. Clara thrived in the high-altitude air. She began to coo and kick her chubby legs often, settling easily when Ethan held her. Something about his sure grip and the low rumble of his voice soothed her. Watching him with the infant Rebecca wondered if life was giving them both a second chance, him at fatherhood, which he had never experienced, and her at building a future she feared she'd lost. A tentative bond grew between them, unspoken but present in every shared glance. Yet guilt gnawed at Rebecca. She couldn't shake the notion that loving another man, or even appreciating his kindness, somehow betrayed James's memory. Late at night, staring into the glowing embers of the fireplace, she tried to reconcile her loyalty to the past with the reality of the present. Grief is not a straight path. She remembered James once telling a patient's family, "We wander through it with no map, looking for signposts along the way." Perhaps Ethan's ranch was one such signpost, lighting a path she hadn't expected. Ethan seemed to grapple with his own hesitations. On a mild afternoon, when they walked along the edge of his property, he talked openly about Josephine. Her laughter, her love of painting, wildflowers, the dream they shared of turning a rugged plot of land into a welcoming home. Some days, he confessed, "I wonder if I'm doing her memory justice. Keeping the ranch running was what she wanted, and I'm trying, but sometimes it feels so lonely." Rebecca nodded, fully understanding the burden of living with an absence so profound it colored every decision. Clara's presence breathed life into Ethan's home. The ranch hands took delight in seeing the baby each morning, competing to make her smile. As the roads cleared, some neighbors dropped by for coffee or tea, sharing fresh bread or sugar to help the new mother, as they had begun to call Rebecca. She still wasn't certain she belonged in Wyoming or if she should continue to Montana to join her sister. But for now, the ranch felt more like home than anywhere else. She cherished quiet moments in Josephine's old garden, which sat dormant under a layer of frost. Soon the earth would thaw, revealing roots and seeds waiting to sprout. Perhaps that was a metaphor for her own life, patiently waiting for healing, for an awakening she thought might never come. Strangely, the idea of planting a garden awakened in her a sense of hope. Once she would have laughed at the thought of living on a ranch, but adversity had a way of remaking one's perspective. It was during one of these reflective moments that Ethan approached her with a question about staying. "You're still set on going to Montana?" he asked, kneeling beside her as she brushed snow off a patch of soil. Rebecca hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted. "I left for Montana because I believed it was our only safe refuge. But Clara's thriving here. I feel less lost." She looked at him, searching his eyes. "But I don't want to overstay your kindness." Ethan gently took her gloved hand. "A home's not about overstaying, Rebecca. You and Clara can remain as long as you want." Her eyes filled. She wondered if the longing she felt was to remain at Carter's Bend, or if it was for a simpler life she'd never reclaim. As winter edged closer to spring, the ranch bustled with tasks. Rebecca learned to ride a gentle mare under Ethan's patient tutelage. The first few lessons were comical. She clung awkwardly to the saddle, squeaking when the horse stepped anywhere unexpected. But Ethan's calm guidance emboldened her. He explained how Josephine had taught him many of the ranching basics. She'd grown up on a small spread in Colorado. Between Josephine's knowledge and his own determination, Carter's Bend had steadily prospered. Rebecca found that her own background, assisting James in his medical practice, gave her a keen sense of organization. She helped Ethan review the ranch ledger, marveling at the complexity of managing cattle sales, feed costs, and wages for the hands. He was meticulous with numbers, a habit Josephine had instilled in him, and they spent hours charting out possible expansions or improvements for the coming season. Each discussion ended with them sharing some small personal story. Rebecca recalling how James once cared for an entire mining camp during a cholera outbreak, or Ethan reminiscing about Josephine's crocheted blankets that still warmed the guest bedrooms. Their growing closeness did not come without emotional hurdles. One afternoon, while sorting through items in a storage trunk, Rebecca found a tinted photograph of a radiant, smiling young woman holding a tiny sapling. She recognized Josephine's eyes from the pictures on the mantel. Ethan noticed her hesitation as she lifted the photograph. "She planted that oak by the side of the house," he said quietly, "said it would stand as tall as the family we hope to raise here." His voice caught, and he gently took the photo, tracing Josephine's face with a tenderness that made Rebecca's throat tighten. That same evening, Clara developed a sudden fever, sending Rebecca into a spiral of fear. The baby's cries were feverish and thin, the memory of losing James fresh enough that Rebecca's mind conjured worst-case scenarios. Ethan was the epitome of calm, applying the same caretaker spirit he used on the ranch. He cradled Clara against his broad chest, walking her through the halls and humming old lullabies. Rebecca brewed tea, applied cool compresses, and fussed with a trembling heart. By dawn, the baby's fever broke, exhausted. Rebecca sank into a rocking chair, weeping in relief. Ethan said nothing but folded her gently into his arms, letting her sob into his flannel shirt. Afterward, a new tenderness settled between them, anchored by gratitude that Claire was safe. They began to talk more openly about everything, the regrets, the love they'd lost, and the faint glimmers of hope they could still see in their future. Ethan confessed that some days the loneliness had nearly driven him to sell the ranch, and Rebecca admitted that she'd been certain her life was over. The day James died, that she'd felt adrift until that storm led her to Carter's Bend. It felt as though the farm's old oak now symbolized not just Josephine's dream, but also a newfound promise that in the wake of tragedy, life could still blossom. Though the snow still lingered, signs of spring started breaking through. Tiny shoots poked up by the garden, and the sun hung in the sky, a bit longer each day. Clara gurgled happily whenever she was taken outside, a thick shawl wrapped around her to guard against the lingering chill. One morning, Ethan led Rebecca to the old barn where he'd stored extra lumber. He showed her a piece of oak from a fallen branch, a casualty of the winter storms, and told her he planned to carve something special, perhaps a cradle or a keepsake box for Clara. The idea of giving new shape to a broken limb touched Rebecca's heart, evoking the unspoken parallel to her own healing. Late March brought a flurry of activity to the ranch. The ice melted into muddy streams, and the cattle started venturing further into the grazing fields. Ethan took on extra ranch hands to manage the new calves, and laughter often rang out from the bunkhouse. The shift in seasons seemed to brighten every corner of Carter's Bend, except for the persistent ache in Rebecca's mind about what her family back in Montana might think. One morning, a letter arrived from her sister Rachel. The thick, carefully penned letter revealed that word had reached Montana of Rebecca's ordeal. Stranded in a storm, rescued by a rancher, Rachel wrote with concern, urging her to come home and consider meeting a local widowed doctor who might be a better match for a young mother. Writing those words stung. Rebecca understood Rachel's intentions were loving, but the letter carried a condescending assumption that she was still a helpless widow in need of proper rescuing. She glanced at Ethan, who was polishing tack and murmuring softly to Clara. In just a few weeks, Carter's Bend had turned from a mere refuge into something that felt undeniably like home. Despite that, guilt pricked at her. She had promised James's family she would keep them updated. She knew Rachel only wanted what was best, but how could she explain to her sister that the life she'd started to build here was unlike anything she'd experienced before? That Ethan was not some random rancher, but a kind soul who'd offered his heart to both her and Clara without even realizing he'd done so. Ethan noticed her distraction and asked about the letter. When she explained, he responded thoughtfully, "Your sister cares for you. I can't fault her for wanting to make sure you're well." He didn't push her to stay, but neither did he encourage her to leave. He simply reminded her that Carter's Bend would welcome her for as long as she desired. Spring's first thunderstorm rolled in one Anderson afternoon, bringing a dramatic sky of black clouds and sizzling lightning. Ethan, Rebecca, and two of the ranch hands raced to secure the barn doors, ensure the horses were safe, and double-check the cattle fences. The wind tore at Rebecca's skirts, reminding her all too well of that nightmarish storm that first brought her here. This time, however, there was no terror, only an adrenaline-fueled sense of purpose. She was part of something bigger than herself, working alongside people she trusted. Drenched and shivering, they stumbled back into the house once their tasks were done. Clara napped blissfully, watched over by one of the older ranch hands. "You sure you weren't a ranch girl from birth?" Ethan teased, handing Rebecca a dry blanket. "You've taken to it like a duck to water." She laughed, recalling how out of place she'd felt when she first arrived. "Hard to imagine that just a few months ago I didn't know a thing about horses or ranch routines. But the more I learn, the more right it feels." They warmed up by the kitchen stove, drinking hot coffee in companionable silence. Eventually, Rebecca found herself resting her head on Ethan's shoulder, lulled by the patter of rain on the roof. He didn't move away. In that quiet moment, they both understood that something fundamental had shifted between them. The question was no longer whether she belonged at Carter's Bend. It was whether they both had the courage to admit that her place and Clara's was right here in the heart of Wyoming. A few weeks later, the ranch was ablaze with new life. A row of trees near the house budded with fresh leaves, and Josephine's old garden, which Rebecca had carefully cleared, started to show sprouts of green. Beyond the fence lines, calves frolicked under the watchful eyes of mother cows. And in the midst of it all, little Clara had begun rolling around on a blanket in the yard, babbling happily whenever Ethan appeared. Rebecca discovered she had a surprising knack for administrative tasks around the ranch. While Ethan and the ranch hands worked outside, she spent afternoons going through the ledgers, itemizing feed and equipment costs, planning for future repairs, and even drafting letters to potential buyers for their spring cattle drive. Each evening, she and Ethan would discuss ranch business over supper, sometimes with Clara in Ethan's lap. The baby would grin toothlessly at him, squealing whenever he made a funny face. Their closeness was easy to see. The ranch hands teased good-naturedly about the boss finally smiling again, while neighbors spoke of how Ethan Carter, so long solitary, had found a new reason to look toward the future. Yet in quiet moments, both he and Rebecca wrestled with lingering guilt over Josephine and James. On more than one occasion, Ethan admitted that sometimes a wave of remorse would strike him, whispering that he was forgetting his late wife or overshadowing her memory. For Rebecca, the fear was slightly different. She worried that in embracing life again, she was dishonoring James's devotion, that she was discarding the life they'd planned. One day she took a moment in Josephine's garden, kneeling at the base of a small stone marker Josephine had placed years ago for a favorite pet. As she gently weeded around it, she whispered, "Josephine, I don't want to erase your place here. I only want to help it flourish." And she thought she sensed in the hush of the breeze a kind of acceptance. Later that afternoon, while trying to organize a cluttered cabinet in Ethan's study, she stumbled across a stack of old letters and sketches. Most were drawings of the ranch barn designs, ideas for expansions, but others were glimpses into Ethan's personal grief. A drawing of Josephine with the oak sapling, sketches of the mountains that framed Carter's Bend, images of an empty cradle and a rocking chair. Rebecca's heart caught in her throat. She realized Ethan had processed his loss the only way he knew how, carving, drawing, building. He turned heartbreak into tangible works of art. That evening, as they sat on the porch, Rebecca dared to share her discovery. Ethan grew quiet, gazing out at the silhouettes of distant hills. "I used to dream Josephine would come back," he said softly. "Every night I'd wake expecting to see her. But after enough time, all I had were these sketches, these carvings. That was the only way I knew to keep her memory alive." Rebecca placed a hand over his. "It's not betrayal to heal," she said, echoing words James had once told grieving families. "We carry them with us always. They shaped who we are." The moment stretched, the hush broken only by Clara's soft coo from inside. Ethan exhaled and something in his posture relaxed. A faint smile touched his lips as he turned to her. "You're right," he said, "but I guess I needed to hear it from someone who knows." Their hands remained clasped as twilight deepened, and though they sat close, no further words were needed. Sometimes healing isn't about forgetting. It's about making space for the future alongside the memory of the past. Soon after, a second letter arrived from Rachel. This time her tone was almost urgent. She insisted that the rumored connection between Rebecca and Ethan sounded impulsive, and insisted that James would have wanted Clara to grow up surrounded by proper society. Rachel ended the letter by suggesting that she had already invited a widowed doctor to dinner upon Rebecca's eventual arrival. The condescension wrapped in sisterly care hit Rebecca like a slap to the face. She tucked the letter in a drawer, her heart heavy. When Ethan asked if everything was all right, she hesitated before confiding the latest development. "Rachel doesn't understand," she said, her frustration evident. "She thinks I'm being reckless, letting a rancher take the place of a respectable man like James. She means well, but—" Her voice trailed off. Ethan's eyes flickered with pain. "I'm sure she's just worried. You came out here with a newborn after a tragedy. If I were your sister, I might be worried too." He paused, staring at his hands. "I don't want to stand in the way. If you need to go to Montana, you both deserve the best life possible." Rebecca's anger flared. She reached out, taking his hands firmly in hers. "The best life possible for me and Clara is one that's filled with love, honesty, and a chance to grow. That's exactly what we have here." She struggled to steady her voice. "I'm not saying we have everything figured out, but I won't pretend to be someone I'm not, or chase some ideal for the sake of appearances." Ethan pulled her closer. In the corner of the room, Clara squealed at the sight of them, clapping her tiny hands. The baby's joy caused them both to laugh, tension momentarily dissolving. "Rebecca," Ethan said quietly once their laughter subsided, "you make me believe in futures I thought I'd lost. But I don't want to trap you here with guilt or gratitude. If you ever feel the pull to go back east or head to Montana, I'll respect that." She pressed a kiss to his cheek. Bold perhaps, but so natural she scarcely realized she'd done it. Right now, she whispered, I only want to be here. That evening, as they settled Clara for bed, they spoke in hushed tones about the possibility of traveling to Montana for a short visit, letting Rachel meet Ethan, see how Clara was flourishing, and perhaps put to rest any rumors of impropriety. But no dinner with strange doctors unless you want to. Ethan teased gently, though his eyes glimmered with earnestness. You're free to make any choice that's right for you. Rebecca felt a renewed sense of certainty. She pictured the dusty main street of her old life, the family acquaintances who would whisper behind fans if a widow remarried too soon. The memory felt distant, overshadowed by the raw authenticity of ranch life. Carter's Bend might not be the polished society Rachel dreamed of, but it was real, demanding, and full of heart, and that was enough for Rebecca. Spring collided with the early summer, bringing longer days and a flurry of projects. Rebecca and Ethan expanded the livestock pens, repaired roofing on the bunkhouse, and started planning a second barn. The orchard near the garden blossomed in fragrant waves of white petals, while Josephine's oak, the one she had planted with such hope, stretched new branches skyward as though proud of its resilience. One golden evening, as the ranch hands played fiddle music, outside Ethan led Rebecca to that oak. Clara, carried in a sling against Rebecca's chest, babbled contentedly, occasionally grabbing fistfuls of Rebecca's hair. There's something I've been meaning to do, Ethan said. Voice quiet, he pulled a folded document from his pocket. A deed with fresh ink. Talked with my lawyer in town, he explained. Eyes warm but serious. Carter's Bend is mine, but I'd like it to be ours, yours, Clara's, and mine, Rebecca's. Eyes flew wide at the words. She took the parchment, scanning it. Sure enough, it listed Rebecca Stone and Clara Stone as co-owners. The final line read, Ethan Carter in full partnership with the above parties. She could hardly speak. Ethan, this is so much. He reached to gently soothe Clara's fussing. All my life, this ranch has been my pride and heartbreak. Josephine and I built it out of nothing, and when she passed, I thought maybe I'd let it fade too. Then you and Clara arrived. It's like the land itself breathed new life into me. I want you both to have the security you deserve. Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes. She recalled James's quiet strength, how he always said home was where love thrived. Now Ethan was offering not just a roof, but a true home written in legal ink, validated by the faith in his heart. For a moment, she imagined how James might have reacted. She felt certain he'd smile, happy his wife and child were truly safe and cherished. She pressed a trembling hand over the lines that read, Clara Stone Carter proposed. Ethan cleared his throat. If it's all right with you, I'd like Clara to take my last name when we're ready. I'd like to be the father she deserves. His voice nearly broke with emotion. You said once I don't replace James, but I can add to what he gave. She'll always know about him, about who he was, but she can also have my name if you'll allow it. Rebecca lifted her gaze from the document. The wind ruffled Ethan's hair, and Clara let out a soft coo. In that moment, the magnitude of love and acceptance overwhelmed her. Yes, she whispered, voice quivering. Yes, we want that. Clara loves you like a father already. They sealed the deed with a simple handshake, an action as old as the frontier itself. But Ethan soon pulled her close for a tender, unspoken promise. The music from the bunkhouse drifted around them, a cheerful tune, underscoring the quiet joy of that moment. Clara gurgled in Rebecca's arms, reaching out toward Ethan, as though approving of this family. The oak overhead shifted in the breeze, leaves fluttering like applause. Weeks later, as the final ribbons of summer gave way to early autumn, word spread that Rebecca and Ethan would marry. At first, it was just an idea floated among the ranch hands, who claimed the boss might finally make an honest woman of his beloved companion. But soon enough, neighbors wanted to help host, and the bunkhouse brimmed with talk of a celebration. Rebecca agreed wholeheartedly. Each time she looked at the ring, Ethan gave her a modest band carved from a polished piece of wood. Before he had a gold one made, her heart danced with an exuberance she never thought possible after James's death. The wedding day dawned crisp and bright. The garden behind the house, Josephine's garden, was in full bloom, bursting with autumn flowers. They chose that spot for the ceremony, wanting to honor the very place that symbolized hope to each of them. Ethan's sister Alice arrived with her 3 energetic children, who took to Clara with unabashed delight. Lucy Morgan, formerly Lucy Miller in the original story, we have renamed for consistency, the wife of one of the ranch hands, helped arrange wildflowers into bouquets. Ranchers from miles around showed up with gifts of fresh pies, embroidered linens, and hearty congratulations. Rebecca dressed in a simple ivory gown, her heart thudding in excitement, and perhaps a lingering sadness. Memories of James inevitably surfaced, but she felt his blessing rather than disapproval. Before stepping outside, she paused by the old trunk that held keepsakes of James and pressed a hand over it. "Thank you," she whispered, imagining him at peace, content that Clara was secure in a father's arms and that she had found love again. She emerged into the sunlight where Ethan waited in a handsome vest and polished boots, Clara perched on his arm in a tiny white frock. The minister stood beneath the oak tree Josephine had planted, leaves rustling in a gentle breeze. Alice's children scattered petals on the grass, and the music of a fiddler rolled over the assembled guests. The vows they spoke were simple but rang with conviction, each acknowledging the past that shaped them and the future they would share. "I vow to honor every memory that led us here," Ethan said quietly, sliding a gold band onto Rebecca's finger, "and to cherish what we become together come drought or storm." Rebecca's voice trembled as she promised to stand by him, to nurture the land and their family. Clara watched them, occasionally reaching up to tug on Ethan's collar as if urging him to say, "I do faster." Laughter rippled through the small crowd when the baby let out a delighted squeal, just as the minister pronounced them husband and wife. The celebration that followed was a blur of dancing food and laughter echoing off the barn walls. Rebecca held Clara as she and Ethan made their rounds, thanking everyone for coming. The baby's face was flushed with excitement, and her newly minted father basked in every second. That night, after the lanterns were dimmed and the last guests rode off, Rebecca and Ethan sat quietly on the porch, Clara asleep in her crib. The Wyoming sky stretched overhead, a canopy of countless stars, their hands linked on the porch railing, wedding bands glinting in the moonlight. "I once thought the storm that nearly took my life was a curse," Rebecca murmured. "But it was a blessing in disguise bringing me to you." Ethan brushed a thumb over her cheek. "I was lost in my own storm for years," he admitted. "You and Clara showed me there was still warmth and love in this world." They kissed softly, the distant sound of a horse nickering in the barn, a comforting reminder that life went on strong and steadfast even in the face of past sorrows. In the months and years to come, Carter's Bend would expand. More families settled nearby. Rachel, upon meeting Ethan, eventually softened her earlier doubts. Clara thrived, and in time a second child was born to the newlyweds, a testament to the cycles of life, renewing despite heartbreak. But on that wedding night, as the wind carried the gentle rustle of leaves from Josephine's oak, Rebecca rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, content in the knowledge that love once found could create a home from the most unlikely of circumstances. And for every season that arrived, be it harsh winter or radiant summer, the abiding warmth of their bond lit the ranch, ensuring no storm could ever truly extinguish the light they discovered together. Looking back on Rebecca and Ethan's journey, it's hard to believe how far they've come since that fateful blizzard. What began as a rescue in the wilderness blossomed into a story of courage, healing, and the power of second chances. By opening their hearts, they built a life rich in family, community, and faith in the future, proving that even the darkest nights can end in radiant morning light. In my view, their experience shows that hope can sprout like a seed in the most unlikely of places. Tragedy might scar us, but it can also pave the way for renewed love and unity. Thank you for sharing in this uplifting tale. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of the story resonated with you most? Share your opinions in the comments, and let's keep the conversation alive.